Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening. We live in a strange age where those words which are full of warmth, full of human relationship, full of empathy, full of love and regard, full of values are frowned upon and are deleted from the vocabulary. It is deemed bad and almost criminal to use those words. Words like father, mother, uncle, aunt, brother, sister, husband, wife, and so on. The place is taken by abstruse words, meaningless, devoid of all affection, all feeling, all emotions, colorless, pale, tasteless. And using those words, one often thinks that as if one is taking unpalatable medicine. Anyway, everyone to his taste. But what is really amazing is that in our politics we use a word so often nauseatingly, the F word. The F word is used to excite, to make you feel impassioned, to make you feel partisan, to make your blood boil, to make you feel in an inhuman manner and behave in an animalistic manner. And our politicians use this word day in and day out. This is a word which creates animosity, which creates, as I said earlier, animal instincts in normal human beings, divides the people, is extremely divisive, and makes you live on an edge. Practically all politicians suffer from the disease of using the F word. Now, lest you should be thinking that I'm talking of F word connected with sex. No, I'm talking of the F word connected with the human psychology. F word dealing with love and affection on one side and quarreling on the other. F word which suppresses human qualities and, as I said, arouses passion, lust, lust for blood, revenge, and all aggressive capabilities. F stands for fight. And in Canada, the most words, F is visible, audible all the time, audible from the leaders, audible from the opposition. There was a time when it was the socialists and the communists who used to use the word fight. They had to divide the country, divide the society. Divide the society between the proletariat and the rulers or kulaks. Divide the society between the haves and the have-nots. But here, these politicians divide to get votes. Imagine when Jagmeet goes on 30th of July in Thunderland and he says, I stand with the bombardiers facing devastation and I'll fight for them. Fight whom? That's not spelled out. Fight is only thing that is spelled out is fight. I'll fight. And as a matter of fact, the myth is not the problem I'm complaining about. He is just being taken an example. Notley, his former premier in Alberta, always used to say, Rachel Notley fighting for you. And Lord, how did she fight? By destroying the economy of Alberta. There was a guy called Bob Bray here in Ontario. And the most prosperous province of Canada, whose GDP was more than many countries, was brought down, not a peg, but a lot hole, because Bob Bray was fighting for you. And then, they introduce a novice, a newcomer, who hopes to be your representative and say, well, we are introducing XYZ. I remember Jagmeet saying that in case of Ruby Turtle. He is a fighter. That was the promise of Jagmeet. But then, was he not a surgeon? Ruby Turtle? And surgeons don't fight. They heal. They protect. Then he said, we are going to fight to change the government. Is it going to be a civil war? Why can't they say that we are going to discuss to change the system, to change the value? Why fight? The whole thing smacks of, as I said, war. For example, they say we are fighting for the jobs. When they say fighting for the job, fighting whom? Who is the enemy? Who is the adversary? Fight is always between two parties. And in a civilized society, there can be stakeholders. There can be no opponents. You can not agree on certain issues. But the fundamentals of a society, fundamentals of a nation, you always agreed upon. Who doesn't bother about giving health facilities to the people? And when they say we'll fight for the universal health care, what a stupidity. And then, if you saw the April election in Alberta, you would have seen the use of the fighting language. While NDP's main slogan was fighting for you, she was fighting for whom? For the workers' right, for the education, for health care, fighting for the families. Against whom? Who hates families? So when you're fighting for families, against whom you're fighting? As a matter of fact, you're fighting against the politicians who are destroying the families. And she had been in power in Alberta for 4 years. She was responsible for education, for workers' rights, for health care. So was she fighting with herself? That was a $1 million question troubling me. But the opposition is no less in a mode to, excuse me please. Please, just a couple of seconds. As I was saying, this disease of fighting doesn't only afflict NDP. My very good friend Jason, he has also been a victim of using the language of combat. He said he'll fight for a fair deal for Alberta. Why not say, I'll try for a fair? I'll ensure that the fair deal is given. I shall see to it that the fair deal is given for Alberta. Because the moment you say, I'll fight for a fair deal for Alberta, that means you are fighting other 9 provinces and the federal government. But then he corrected himself. He said, fight for Alberta is a fight for Canada. But again, if you are fighting for Canada, whom you are fighting with? Fighting for always assumes you are fighting with or fighting against. And these 2 prepositions, against and with, are supposed to be assumed by the audience, by the voter. You know, there is a technique, if you have read that, a clockwork orange. So, the technique adopted there, Ludovica technique, comes to my mind immediately when I hear these politicians talking about fighting. Whenever a politician talks of fighting for something, I try to reach for a bucket. This talk of fighting is something people in liberal professions use to great deal. And as I said, in the communist social country, they use even now. They always say that they are fighting for the little guys, for the downtrodden, for the poor, for the marginalized society. Maybe they're fighting for their piles. But can this not be done with a little self-aware shamelessness? If I was to say that I'm fighting for the common people, you would be right to heckle me. I have beliefs, I have principles, but I'm not General Patton taking up tanks against Nazi hordes of Hitler. What kind of preposterous, hyperinflated self-image are these politicians projecting? The self-image is typical of politicians. We are stuck with it every day by the language of the politicians, which hardly resembles the language that we use in our common discourse and common intercourse. And one of the reasons is this tag, fighting for Jew. It becomes a trend. It's hard to resist it. And as a matter of fact, there's nothing in the job of a politician that involves fighting, even metaphorically. A job of politician is supposed to be constructive, to be building up peace, to be a peacemaker. And self-evidently, very few people who grew up enjoying a fine tussle of bike rakes, and I doubt anybody would be so uncomplaining. Politics needs a lot of persuasion. Politics needs a lot of rhetoric, but not fighting. If you remember, there was old time when there used to be physical fights. And in the time of Romans, very often the senators would take out their rapiers and start fighting with each other. The duels were very common. You say something and other. But then those duels are possibly finding now an expression in the liberal use of the word fighting. Sometimes I feel that these people, these politicians, some of them are quite demented, are impacted by fighting. They consider themselves to be Che, the revolutionary with an AK, Winston Churchill saying that I'll fight on the beach, I'll fight on the farm, I'll fight in the homes. But he was really fighting the Germans. But these politicians are like Don Quixote, madmen, and they are not barnstorming, they are only brainstorming. In reality, psychologically, when you talk of fighting, you conjure up a vague picture of great contending forces. Something on the lines of famous battles comes to your mind, whether it was a battle of Plassey or Saragari, whether it was a great Mahabharata or 100 Years' War, or the War of Roses, or the First World War, or Runnymede War, or the Civil War of US. But that was it. And it's so crazy that politics in most of the countries, including Canada, the art of politics, which should be art of reconciliation. Reconciliation of legitimate social interest is being chucked out of the window by this talk of fighting. And maybe that's the goal of the politicians. But politicians love fighting for the things, they are usually be rather strangled to say fighting against. They never say whom they are fighting against. That's what I said in the beginning. They always avoid, they say always fighting for, not fighting against. Why don't they fight against corruption? Why don't they fight against recession? Why don't they fight against dishonesty? Why don't they fight against criminality? Why don't they fight against racism? No, they will not do that. They will neither tell you they are fighting whom, they are fighting against whom, or they are fighting with what? What guns and hostages are using, what napalm and the nuclear bombs they are using. So whenever you hear a politician saying, I'm fighting for you, be sure he is trying to involve you in something nefarious, something horrible, something inhuman, something which enhances his interest, not yours. He is fighting essentially for himself at your cost. You are his weapon. He is using you as a weapon to further his interest. So, here's the time to ban the F word. And F stands for fighting. Thank you.